Hello and welcome. You are on StratNews Global. I am Nitin Gokhale. On a Monday evening in India, we are just about 48 hours after a major visit by U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, who was in India on a 2-day visit, actually swinging through Asia and reaffirming the solid defense ties the US has with India. Of course, from India, he went north. So the gist on Monday evening is about US-India defense ties. Are they transformational or they transactional? That's we are going to discuss in the coming 30 minutes. And joining me on the program are three very knowledgeable panelists and joining me from three different parts of the globe. First up, Dr. Vivek Lall, who's the Chief Executive of General Atomics Global Corporation, and also a member of the Board of Directors of the USIBC, the US-India Business Council. He is currently visiting New Delhi, is joining us from New Delhi. Dr. Aparna Pande, who is the head of the India Initiative at the Hudson Institute, joining us from Washington, D.C. And Darshana Baruah, who is the Associate Fellow with the Carnegie Endowment and, of course, a visiting fellow with the Sasakawa Foundation in Japan, and she's currently in Tokyo. So we have three panelists joining from three different parts of the world, which we will then get different perspective from them. But first up, Vivek, if I can come to you, the US-India Defense Cooperation is, of course, nearly a 15-year-old big kind of a step that has been taken over the past 15 years. It's become something which is now taken for granted. But going forward, how do you see the cooperation going into different areas like cyber and space, as the Secretary of Defense mentioned?
Yeah, thanks, Nitin. It's an honor to join you and all the panelists this evening from Delhi. Indeed, I think we're watching a transformational relationship between the two countries. As you pointed out, it's been 15 plus years in the making of both countries coming together at various levels, the government to government levels as well as the business to business levels. And certainly the progress that has been made in defense trade, and as well as a lot of the policy issues, a lot of the basic foundational agreements that have come into place, it allows for the advancement of the technologies that one is discussing between both countries. And certainly, as you point out, cyber and space become increasingly important if you look at the world dynamics currently, and those are areas which again merit a lot of investment and thought by both countries to take the relationship even to greater heights in the years to come.
True. In fact, we will actually explore that further as we go along. But Dr. Aparna Pande, if I can come to you, your first thoughts on Secretary of Defense visit to Asia and particularly to India, where he spent 2 full days. And then later, instead of the usual hop over to Islamabad, went to Kabul, of all places. What's your first reaction to that?
Thank you, Nitin. A pleasure to be here with people I know and on this panel. Three quick things. One, I'd say it's a natural evolution of the relationship over the last 2 decades, especially. India is a major defense partner. Vivek mentioned a lot, but the defense ties have become the strongest of the 3 pegs: economic, values-based, and defense, of the strategic partnership. So I think it reflects that natural evolution and how far sort of the relationship has come to. It is symbolically and strategically important that the Secretary of Defense on his first trip to Indo-Pacific actually went to Indo-Pacific, went to Japan and South Korea, who are treaty allies, and then came to India and then Afghanistan and then went back. This emphasizes or exemplifies how important the US defense and military actually view the relationship with India. And third, I'd say it's sort of the fact that it comes so soon after President Biden had the Quad meeting. It also demonstrates the fact that the Indo-Pacific is going to be extremely important, or if not more important, for this administration as it was for the previous administration. And therefore, India-US relationship will be a strong component of that. Thanks.
Indeed. In fact, taking off from the last point you mentioned about Indo-Pacific, Darshana, you are a watcher, you're a researcher on Indo-Pacific and maritime issues. How do you see after the Quad meeting of the summit meeting of the leaders and Secretary Defense swing through Asia, especially Japan, Korea, and India? Do you think something more concrete than just bilateral and multilateral exercises like the Malabar and port visits will emerge out of these deliberations?
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. Really pleasure to be here with Dr. Lall and Dr. Pande. I think the relationship really has become much more stronger, and the visit really does exemplify what has come to be achieved, come out of the relationship so far. Even if there were statements, very short statements that were made by Defense Minister Rajnath Singh and Secretary of Defense General Lloyd Austin, the three things that stood out, which I think would be kind of areas that underlines what India and US are looking to work together. First was the recognition that India and US needs to work beyond Indo-Pacific Command with Africa Command and Central Command, because the two commands does cover the other parts of the Indian Ocean region, which is a priority theater for India. So I think there has been a lot of talks between India and US, especially in the maritime security dialogues, to work through the seams of the Indo-PACOM in the Indo-Pacific, and I think it's finally great to see that recognition at the official level. Second, Secretary of Defense in his tweets mentioned Indo-Pacific and Western Indian Ocean region, which I found it was interesting because the Western Indian Ocean is a bit of a blind spot within the Indo-Pacific concept, and definitely also for the Indian Navy, although we are doing much more there, the Navy is doing much more there. But I think it reflects that there is a need to work in that area, and to put things into context, the Western Indian Ocean is where the first Chinese military facility came up. So I think that's something is important. So there's definitely, I think we're going to see more. And finally, they have highlighted specific areas that are applicable to the Indo-Pacific, which is information sharing and maximizing the existing agreements that are already there, foundational agreements, including the logistics supply. The fact that they have actually specifically mentioned and outlined that reflects what are the priority areas, because for the Indian Navy, it is information sharing, it is intelligence sharing, it's maritime domain awareness. We've had American P8s in Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and I think we will see more utilizing these foundational agreements and these. So I thought the conversations and the even brief statements really highlighted some key points.
Indeed. In fact, I will come to Dr. Pande on that point about more needs to be done on the Western Indian Ocean. But I know Dr. Lall has to leave for another appointment, and therefore, one final question to you, Dr. Lall, about the kind of contradictions that may emerge in coming months and years, where Indian Defense Ministry or the Indian Defense sector is talking about Make in India, Atmanirbhar Bharat, and then there is, of course, the issue of tech transfer from US defense companies or defense contractors. How does that play out? Because increasingly they will sort of have a conflict with each other. Or do you think there would be an opportunity for both sides to work on a joint venture, or some solution to be found for this contradiction that might dampen some of the spirit in this?
Thanks, Nitin. That's a great question, and I see it as a win-win for both countries. I think as both democracies have grown closer over the last decade or two in this domain, you've seen a lot of USIBC member companies engage with the Indian industry. So the industry to industry level engagement has ratcheted up quite a bit, not only the OEMs, but the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 supply chains. And, you know, it's market conditions that govern that. So we live in a globalized economy, and certainly in the global defense industry where, you know, where there are win-win business cases for working together. There's innovation and R&D going both ways, I think. And that's a very healthy sign. There are startups in both countries that are beginning to get a wider platform by looking bilaterally. So, you know, from a corporate standpoint, as long as there continues to be increased transparency, accountability, and predictability, I envision it to be a win-win situation to put all the resources to bear for both countries and both countries to grow, especially in the domains of beyond manufacturing, but in R&D and innovation.
Indeed. In fact, we have spoken about this on other platforms, our sister website, bharatshakti.in, whenever we have had this opportunity about how to maximize and how to get the best out of both sides as far as tech transfer or joint ventures are concerned. Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Lall. We will see you sometime again. Thanks for your time and your thoughts. In the meantime, Dr. Pande, if I can come to you and now look at the definition of Indo-Pacific that India has been making. If you remember Prime Minister Modi's speech at the Shangri-La Dialogue in 2018, where he laid out India's vision for Indo-Pacific, which said eastern shores of Africa to Western Pacific. Whereas the US was not really on the same page for a while. But Secretary Defense Austin coming and talking about the Africa Command and the Central Command, and both Indo-PACOM also being on board and will be increasingly interacting with each other as far as the defense sides are concerned. Is that now the tweaking has taken place in the minds of the American policymakers, do you think? And also there will be much more work done in that sector.
So, Nitin, I would say this is a sort of an evolution, right? So what we have to remember is that unlike India or sort of other countries, the US defense actually divides the world up into commands. And so from their point of view, sort of, you know, CENTCOM was what dealt with what we refer to as the West Asia, and PACOM would deal. But over time, in the last few years, notice this, PACOM has become Indo-PACOM. You know, considering the Indo-Pacific, but also India's centrality. There was an advisor, there was an Indian naval advisor even at CENTCOM about a year or two ago. And now sort of, you know, Indo-Pacific will include what India says Gulf of Aden to Straits of Malacca and beyond. So I would say it is a natural evolution where it's difficult, I'm sure you understand, for bureaucracies to change definitions. So what they have tried to do over the last few years is try and make it easier for the commands to work with each other within this broader rubric of Indo-Pacific. And so I would say it is good, it is useful, it will help India's interactions with all the commands, even those which actually Darshana mentioned. But sort of, you know, I think this is going to move further. I would see this as, you know, the policy community and the strategic community wanting something, and then the organizational structure trying to work around the pre-existing system, which is difficult to break, but you are trying to find, you know, some way that you can bring everybody together on the same table. It's positive. I think it will keep moving. The more emphasis on Indo-Pacific that the US Defense Ministry and the US strategic community and the president emphasizes, the more we will see such endeavors in the months and years ahead.
It looks like that, and that's why the question that we are asking, that the centrality of the defense ties between India and US is in no doubt anymore. Over the past 15, 20 years, it has really become the central point of the strategic and important relationship between the two countries, the two democracies. But going forward, this was important that they are on the same page as far as their definitions are concerned. and I think that has happened. But Darshana, coming to you, in the maritime domain, if you look back, all this started in the aftermath of the tsunami in 2004, then carried on with the exercises. In 2007, we had the five-nation exercise Malabar. Then it became back to bilateral. Then the Japanese joined in, and now, of course, Australians have come back into it. But what more can be done in the Indo-Pacific by India and the US to make it truly transformational ties between the two countries? Darshana.
I think we are heading toward that kind of a relationship where, going to the next steps. And I think it's all really embedded within the initiatives that are already in place. For instance, using Limoa to have the P8s in Andamans, even if it was for a few hours just for refueling. But the idea is to be able to use each other's facilities and operational strength to do more. And I think using these institutions and platforms to do very concerted and very direct missions, and I think those would include anti-submarine warfare. It would include maritime domain awareness. Intelligence and information sharing is something that is of interest to both. As you know, the Navy's priority is maritime domain awareness, and that includes a range of issues. America has also posted a liaison officer to the Information Fusion Center in Gurgaon, and there are much more communications and collaborations on it. And I do see a lot more to be done using the strategic islands, which sits across the key choke points, and maybe it could be a start in that sense. The Western Indian Ocean is something that more can be done. Diego Garcia is complicated, but if there is political will and there's a way to sort things out, that is another area. The French are also in the Western Indian Ocean. So I do think there are a lot of avenues. I think the necessary steps, the foundational agreements, the logistics, the platforms and the avenues exist. It is now using these existing avenues and the partnership to do the missions and address threats that are important and are shared between two. And in that, I think intelligence and information sharing would perhaps take a bit of a priority within the MDA umbrella, as well as ASW, anti-submarine warfare.
Yes, indeed, that would be the progression that both sides desire, along with other partners in the Quad, at least to begin with, if not the other smaller countries. But Aparna, coming to the larger picture now, as the two officials, the US officials, had a swing through Asia and especially Indo-Pacific, Japan, Korea, India, the Americans and the Chinese had that now famous pact in Alaska. And now I hear that Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister, is about to meet the Russian foreign minister, Lavrov, which indicates that a lot of churn is happening. Do you see some battle lines being drawn in the Indo-Pacific or in the Indian Ocean region, given the fact that both sides are increasingly focusing on the larger Indo-Pacific construct that as India sees it?
So, Nitin, I would say the battle lines have already been drawn and some years ago. Part of the reason that the India-U.S. defense relationship is where it is today is because of the natural evolution. The other part is the rise of China. For some years now, the US establishment believes that there is an upcoming peer competition or peer rivalry with China, as there was with the Soviet Union during the Cold War. So each side is preparing for what is going to be some years or a decade or more of of US-China peer competition. And in that, the India-US relationship matters. So for China, relations with Russia matter, relations, with its near abroad, with its. So I'd say both sides are trying to make sure that they have allies and they have partners. And in this, India has good relations with Russia. It has good relations with the United States. It has an antagonistic relationship with China. And so, there will be some, I would say, repercussions of this even on the India-US relationship, whether it's CATSA, whether it is, India trying to bring Russia into Indo-Pacific, but US not wanting Russia to be part of Indo-Pacific, whether it is how India balances the India-China relationship vis-a-vis the India-U.S. and India Quad relationship. We have to wait and see. But yes, the peer competition is here. And countries around the world will have to, at some level, pick and choose the side they are going to be on.
I think India is in a very difficult position in that sense. Just look at one case of procurement of, excuse me, of S-400 from Russia. Although Secretary Defense did say that we will cross the bridge when we come to it, or words to that effect, there is this constant threat of the CATSA sanctions being imposed on India if Russian deliveries begin as they are expected to towards the end of this year. Then there will be some kind of a difficult period to encounter. But do you think India can still maneuver its way through this very tricky situation of wanting Russia on one side because the Russian arms equipment, arms weaponry and supplies are still important for India, and so is the US arms supply. How do you think India should negotiate that?
So it's going to be a balancing act. I mean, I think part of the reason India purchases, as you know, from Russia is to keep relations with Russia open. There, aside from gas and defense, there's little that we have in the Russia relationship. But it's strategically important. We would not want Russia to get closer to China, closer than it already is, or to get close to Pakistan. And so for us in our neighborhood, good relations with Russia are important. However, and we need a supply, supplies are required for our Russian or Soviet-made equipment. However, we have to play a balancing act because CATSA sanctions were not designed to be imposed on a country like India. They were meant to target Russian defense in corporations. So they are not meant to target countries like India, Indonesia, Vietnam that do purchase or have an old relationship with Russia and former Soviet Union. But we will have to, at the end of the day, it is going to be a decision by the Biden administration on how important ties with India are. I do believe that ties with India are important enough, and the history of sanctioning India is relatively recent for the US administration to not sanction India. But we have to continue to sort of, emphasize and our strong ties with the United States and make sure that we don't reach the stage where the question of a sanction being imposed comes.
I think that's going to be a tricky part for Indian diplomacy and Indian national security decision makers. But Darshana, in that context, the Indian effort to somehow get the Russians included in the Indo-Pacific, or at least have their presence in some ways, would that hamper or would that create difficulties for the other partners of Quad or in the Indo-Pacific, other countries those are with India? What's your sense?
I think it depends how Russia also engages in the region. I mean, even if within the concept of Indo-Pacific, as far as maritime security is concerned, Indian Ocean is the priority theater. So if Russia chooses to engage more with China on that, or say, and its allies, which say does not necessarily have a positive attitude towards India, I think there will be some friction there. But I think Russia definitely is looking to, you have the base in Sudan now. I mean, they've acquired it for 25 years, which brings Moscow to the Red Sea. And it's really going to be very close to one of the most important choke points in the Indian Ocean region. I'm sure that has created some concerns in Washington. I think there are two ways to look about it, at least from what I hear, is one, that maybe India can actually balance or manage the Russia engagement in the Indian Ocean region. So it might not be the worst thing for Washington. But Russia is much more engaged also in the African coast and with African islands and littorals, where India necessarily did not have that strong of a presence, and neither does America as far as naval cooperation is concerned. It's essentially French. So I think it depends how Russia engages with India's strongest maritime partners, which is Australia, Japan, France, US, and others in the region, and what kind of an effect that has on India. As Dr. Pande say, India-Russia relationship is important. It's a strategic one. But if for reasons for Russian national interest that Russia engages in the region in a way that is not inconsistent with India's own interest or kind of say positive toward it. I'm sure India will find a way to balance that as India has in many cases. So I think that's something we'll have to see how how Russia engages. We have seen exercises with China, Iran, and others. So it depends really how this takes forward, how Moscow engages.
Indeed, as I said, this is the tricky part for India, but the past is, if past is any indication, I think then India has sort of chartered these waters very well, the difficult terrain. But we will see what happens. But no matter what happens, as far as the other countries are concerned, the Indo-U.S. defense ties, from what I hear from all of you, are now on the cusp of being transformational rather than just transactional. So we'll have to wait and watch what happens. Thank you very much, both of you, for your time, and especially Darshana. It's late in the day as far as your time is concerned in Tokyo, and Dr. Pande early in the day in the US. Thanks for joining our program. We will keep coming back to you whenever an opportunity arises. But that has been a fascinating discussion, and thanks for joining again.
Thank you very much, Nitin.
Thank you so much.
And to our viewers, do keep watching StratNews Global, the gist from Monday to Wednesday, which comes to you live. Keep sending your feedback. It may not be possible for us each time to take questions, but do keep sending feedback. And of course, keep supporting us if you like our program and if you like our content, as we try and get you as many diverse opinions and as many different topics to discuss. Till the next time, it's goodbye.